had many experiences, but I will tell you one that freaked me out. Because I was not the only witness. I was about 12 years old and I was talking with my dad in his room. My mom was in the closet with the lights off, but we could clearly see her folding clothes. Well, during me and my dad's conversation, he had asked my mom something, but to no reply. He eventually got to the point where he started to yell. I got up and stepped into the closet, but then I heard my mom walk into the room and ask why he was yelling her name. I looked at her and she had a towel wrapped around her. I quickly looked back into the closet and saw nothing. Absolutely nothing. This obviously creeped me and my dad out, whatever we saw. It wasn't my mom. Whatever it was, it had her shape and even the bun. My mom always had her hair in a bun. Would have completely thought this was my imagination if it weren't for my dad also being there and seeing it too. When I was 10, me and my grandpa were driving to a ranch in Mexico. It was 3:40 in the morning and we were driving on a supposedly haunted road. My grandpa had a blue Ford pickup truck. Anyways, my grandpa and I were just making conversation. He then said this road is haunted. Lady stands on the side of the road asking for rides. So I got scared and started looking out the window. 40 minutes past, the sun is still down. My grandpa keeps looking at his rearview mirror. I asked him what's wrong and he replied nothing. I then look at the mirror, my heart drops and I'm just paralyzed in fear. I see a woman in a white dress with pitch black eyes in the back of our truck. My grandpa looks at the mirror once again. I'm guessing he sees it as well and he just slams on the brakes. We both just look at each other. We look at the mirrors and she was gone. Me and my grandpa addressed what happened and confirmed that we both saw her. We got out of the truck and we were moments away from falling into a deep ditch off the road. If my grandpa hadn't slammed on the brakes, we could have been dead. Ever since then, we never took that road again. Scariest moment of my life. I'm an atheist who never believed in anything supernatural or the spirit world, but this one weird thing happened to me. It was the early 2000s. I was 21 and my granddad was in hospital with bone marrow cancer. He didn't have long. In fact, that day we'd been told to visit to say our goodbyes. It was October, so the evenings were getting darker. It was only about 7 p.m. when I got home. I rolled a joint, put Fast and Furious 2 in the DVD player, opened my bedroom window and lit it. The entire house went dark, like a power cut. TV off, lights out, everything. I noticed as I looked out to the street it's only our house. Dad checks the fuse box and nothing had tripped it out. It was only off 2 minutes and then everything came back on. That exact moment the phone rings. It's Nan. Granddad's dead. He was an electrician. It all started last summer when I was staying at my grandmother's old house. My grandmother had passed away a few years earlier and the house had been left largely untouched, full of her belongings and memories. I always loved visiting her, but this time felt different. There was a heaviness in the air, like the house was holding onto something. One night, I was lying in bed, trying to sleep when I heard it. Soft, faint whispers coming from the living room. I thought it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, but then I heard a distinct voice. A woman's voice. It sounded like my grandmother calling my name. My heart raced and I lay still, straining to listen. For a few minutes, curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed my phone for light and crept down the hallway. As I approached the living room, the whispers stopped. I pushed the door open, and the room was empty. The old rocking chair in the corner was moving slightly, though. I shook it off as just the wind or my mind playing tricks. The next day, I mentioned it to my mom, who brushed it off. "You're just tired, honey. The house has been empty for too long," she said. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was there. At night, I decided to stay up a little later, hoping to catch whatever it was again. As I sat in the dim light, I felt a chill wash over me, and then just like before, I heard the whispers. This time, they were clearer, almost pleading. I could swear I heard my name mixed in with the whispers. I was terrified, but I felt drawn to it. Summoning all my courage, I called out, "Grandma, is that you?" The room fell silent. I felt a sudden rush of air, as if someone had just walked past me. My skin prickled, and I felt an overwhelming sadness. In a moment of panic, I turned to leave, but then I heard her voice clearly. "Help me." It was so strong and desperate that I froze. I didn't know what to do, so I just stood there, trembling. The next day, researched the history of the house. I learned that my grandmother had been deeply involved in community work, and some of her old friends had passed away under mysterious circumstances. Third of her spirit was somehow linked to their stories, still trying to make sense of it all. So that night, I went back to the living room feeling a sense of duty. I lit a candle and sat in front of the rocking chair. "I'm here, Grandma. What do you need?" Felt a warm breeze, and for a moment Elle thought I saw her, a figure wrapped in soft light, hovering near the window. The whispers returned, but this time they were softer, more comforting. "Thank you," they said. I didn't understand what I was thanking her for, but it felt right. But that night, the whispers ceased and the house felt lighter. I spent the rest of my time there feeling a sense of peace, as if I had helped her find closure. When I left, I felt like I was leaving a part of myself behind, but also taking a piece of her with me. Now, whenever I think of that summer, I remember the connection we shared and the power of listening to the whispers of those we've lost. I can't remember how old I was exactly, but I must have been around 7 or maybe even 6. I was in the park with my mom and was playing on one of the swings, and another little girl was on the other. My mom called me to leave and I said I was playing with my new friend, and she said no one else was there. Spooky if you ask me. I had insisted she was there and we were playing and laughing. I'm not sure what to make of it or why I'm remembering it now. Hi Reddit. It's me again. It's been a while and I don't have any excuse except the fact that I'm lazy and life is busy. Nevertheless, I am going to try to post on here more, since it's Halloween season and who doesn't love some ghost stories. Today's story is another one of my own. A couple years back I was home with my mom and nobody else. We were laying in my mom's bed, both on our phones, sitting in silence. You know how in some homes the vents in one room go to another room? Well, mine do that. As we laid in silence, my mom said, "Hey, is the TV on? I can hear something. Will you go walk around and make sure nothing is on?" Reluctantly said yes and got up, checking each room to find nothing. When I was just about to call it quits, I heard something coming from my basement. Now at this time, the bedroom in the basement was empty as it had just flooded. I opened the door to the basement and remember the light bulbs didn't work from the flooding. I shined my flashlight and made my way down the stairs. My basement walls are lined with bookshelves full of old books, toys, and a lot of my great-grandmother's antiques. I was panning the bookshelves with my flashlight and saw what was making the noise. Sitting on a shelf was a Horse music box spinning around playing music. As soon as I shined my light on it, it fell off the shelf. Of course, I turned and ran upstairs. My mom insisted that I go back down and try to find the music box. To this day, we've never found it. I hadn't thought about Sarah in years. Life has a funny way of pushing old memories to the back of your mind, until something brings them crashing forward. For me, it was the sound of my phone ringing on a quiet October evening. I was lounging on the couch, half watching some random horror movie on TV, when her name lit up on my phone. Sarah. I hadn't seen her since high school. Without thinking, I answered, "Hey, Rach." Her voice was cheerful, familiar, as if no time had passed. For a moment, I couldn't find my words. "Sarah, is that really you?" I asked, my voice cracking with disbelief. God, it's been forever. We fell into an easy rhythm, reminiscing about old times. We talked about Halloween pranks we used to pull on our neighbors, the toilet papering, the candy swaps, the silly costumes. It felt like no time had passed at all. Like we were still those kids running through the streets without a care. But as the conversation continued, something started to feel off. She began mentioning things I had forgotten, small details about my life. Things even my closest friends wouldn't remember. How I used to sneak out of my bedroom window at night to meet boys. How I would write love letters and hide them in the cracks of the brick wall near the school, hoping someone would find them. I hadn't thought about those things in years, let alone talked about them. "How do you remember all of this?" I asked, laughing nervously. "Oh, Rach, I remember everything," she said, her voice soft but carrying an edge that made my skin crawl. Conversation shifted, becoming darker, more intimate. She started talking about my adult life. Things she couldn't know, my failed engagement, the nights I'd cried myself to sleep, my insecurities, the ones I didn't share with anyone. It was like she had been there, watching me all these years. never told you about that," I said, my throat tightening. Her response was immediate, almost too eager. "Of course you didn't, but I know you, Rach. I know you better than anyone." A chill ran down my spine. I looked around my darkened living room, suddenly feeling exposed. Vulnerable. My heart pounded as the conversation spiraled deeper into territory I couldn't comprehend. Every word she spoke felt like a needle pressing into wounds I thought had healed long ago. "You're not happy, are you, Rachel?" she whispered. "Not really." I froze, my hands trembling. "What are you talking about? You've been pretending for so long. You've always been pretending, even back then." I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at her name on the screen, my breath coming in shallow gasps. This wasn't right. None of this was right. I hung up. For a few minutes, I sat in silence, trying to process what had just happened. It felt like I was suffocating, like the air in my apartment had thickened, closing in around me. I needed to hear her voice again to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. I quickly dialed her number. The phone rang once, twice, then a voice answered, but it wasn't Sarah. "Hello," a man's voice, deep and unfamiliar. I hesitated. "Is Sarah there?" There was a long pause on the other end. Then quietly, the man said, "I'm sorry, but Sarah passed away 5 years ago." The world seemed to tilt beneath me. "What? No, that's not possible. I just talked to her." "Who is this?" he asked, his tone growing suspicious. "Rachel. I was just talking to Sarah on the phone." Another silence, this one longer, colder. "I don't know who you were talking to," the man said, SK. "But it wasn't Sarah. She died in a car accident. I'm her brother." I could barely hear him over the blood rushing in my ears. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone across the room, but instead I just hung up, my fingers trembling as they pressed the end call button. Sarah was dead. How could that be? I just heard her voice. I'd been talking to her for hours. I had laughed with her, shared memories. This couldn't be happening. I sat there staring at my phone, waiting for it to ring again, half hoping, half terrified that it would be her. The silence of my apartment was suffocating. The shadows in the room felt deeper, darker, like they were pressing in around me. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. For days, I kept going over the conversation in my head, dissecting every word, every detail. I even dug up old yearbooks, photos of Sarah from high school, trying to make sense of it. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that she had been there. On the other end of the line, Sarah, my Sarah, but she was dead. Then, a week later, as I was getting ready for bed, my phone rang again. It was her. Her name, bright as day, lit up on the screen, Sarah. I stared at it, my hand frozen, trembling, my breath hitched in my throat as the phone continued to ring, the sound growing louder, more insistent. I didn't answer. I couldn't. But even as I let the call go to voicemail, I knew deep down that whatever I had spoken to that night, it wasn't Sarah. It was something else, something that knew me, knew my life, my secrets. And it wasn't finished with me yet. The phone buzzed again, a voicemail. I pressed play, the room growing colder with each passing second. "Hey, Rach," her voice whispered through the speaker. "Why didn't you pick up? Don't you miss me?" And then, in the silence that followed, I could hear her breathing low and steady, still there, waiting, and I knew she always would be. Growing up, after my parents split up, my mother had me move with her half the time to a house that she shared with her other divorced friend and her daughter, who was a few years older than me. I was around 11 and her daughter was about 14. Life was full of turmoil at the time for me as the youngest child, only girl, poverty-stricken, and my mother an alcoholic. This house gave me the creeps from day one of moving in. The thing that always seemed so strange to me was that the house was facing opposite of the road. The only one like that on the entire street. Long dirt driveway that led up to the house, which our main entrance was from the back porch into the kitchen. This was a 3-story home, including the basement, which was completely unfinished except for the washer and dryer. That, of course, was hooked up way in the back corner of the entire room. On the first floor was the master bedroom, the only bathroom, a computer room. The door to the basement and the kitchen, living room area. Upstairs were 2 bedrooms. One my mother and I shared, and the other one the daughter stayed in. The master bedroom downstairs was for my mother's friend. I was young and alone. Always that superstition so ill looked harder into any little thing I thought was a ghost. One thing that triggered me right away was the basement door. It was latched to the wall, but loosely. It was constantly being blown open by a draft, as the adults of the house would say. That explanation never sat right with me. I believed in my heart there was a spirit there, letting its presence be known through that door. It would happen at the most random of times and almost purposely when it was just me, by myself downstairs nearby. This alone had me become very imaginative about what was going on. I would create stories in my mind of what could be. I knew I was taking these slight paranormal experiences and running with them in my mind. But there were a few things that truly made me feel it was all so real. I was going to school and telling my friends ghost stories about the house, as a way to garner attention and almost cope with the situation. I was pretty much lying about 98% of everything I said. But the truth is this: the basement door was opening on its own. The daughter of my mother's friend didn't believe what I had to say at first, until one day after high school she got home before anyone else. She went to shower, and after finishing in the shower, while home alone, the locked doorknob to the bathroom shook rapidly, as if someone tried to force their way in. This bathroom door was on the opposite side of the basement door in the same hallway. She believed me from that moment on. Her friend came over once that claimed to be a psychic medium, and he said that he saw a tall, dark figure walk out of the hallway into the kitchen as well. Besides all that, is the night you could say I got what I asked for. Clear, cold, hard proof that I was living in a haunted house. I've told this story to anyone that ever cared to listen, and have been met with so many different reactions. People have flat out said they don't believe me because of how crazy it sounds. So here's what happened. I was in the computer room downstairs. It was around 9 p.m. and I was using the house phone to talk to my friend from school about whatever we were doing on the computer together. The adults weren't home. Just me downstairs, and upstairs was my mother's friend's daughter taking a weed nap. No joke, she was a stoner. The door to the computer room was open and had a clear view down the hall to the basement door, which was a bit too close for comfort. As I'm on the phone, the basement door creaks open. I immediately got scared and decided to go upstairs as quick as possible. My friend on the phone knew about the situation, but being the bold kids we were, she encouraged me to go back downstairs after a few minutes of being upstairs. Bored without the computer, I agreed to be ballsy and head back downstairs, except my approach is what I believe. What warranted what happened next. I hung up the phone with my friend and started to go back downstairs, confronting the spirit that I felt was harassing me and personally targeting me. At the time, What I Want From Me by Adam Lambert was big on the radio, so I sang the line, "What I Want From Me," going down the stairs. I take it even further and start acting confrontational towards the spirit, saying, "Fuck you, ghost, you can't do shit to me," and sticking my middle finger up at the basement door. I know, super cringe and embarrassing to even remember. While I'm doing this, I walked around to the kitchen. My back is to the front back door. Keep in mind, it's like 9 p.m. at night. The doorbell rings at this exact moment. I'm expecting it to be either my mother or her friend getting home after the long day. Super embarrassed that I just got caught talking to nothing. I turn around and pull the sheer curtain to the side to see who's standing at the door. Nobody. This doorbell speaker system is hooked up in the hallway of the basement door. Unfortunately for me, this isn't just a regular ding-dong traditional doorbell. For some odd reason, we had this super extra doorbell system that played a different song every time you rang it. For example, Jingle Bells or something else short and sweet. So by the time the doorbell chime completes and I see there's nobody at the door, to fully process what's going on, and yet it gets worse. To the first bell chime finishes, I swear to everything in my life and all that I cherish, a voice comes out of the speaker system, a feminine voice, one that is speaking gibberish to my ears, and then the doorbell rings again. I ran up the stairs so damn fast. I'm screaming the daughter's name to wake her up and bang on her door, so she can wake up and come unlock it to let me in. By the time she does and I come inside, she's like, "What's going on?" I told her to be quiet and she got to hear the final doorbell chime. I explained to her what happened and she just sat there in shock. A few other incidents occurred during my time there, but nothing as clear and terrifying as that night. A few months later, my mother and her friend had a huge fight and we moved out. I believe that spirit in that house targeted me and fed off the negativity in my life. Spoke to a few psychics since becoming an adult, and one psychic in particular brought up this spirit and says she followed me. I believe it may be true. I have a recurring dream of a girl locked in a basement. my spirit begging me to save her, not to leave her. I could never forget my experience in that house, and especially not that night.